For our text tonight, I'd like to go to the Old Testament book of Proverbs, Proverbs chapter 27. Proverbs 27, and I'd like to read verse 6 and then 9 and 10. Proverbs 27, verse 6. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. Now verse 9 and 10. Ointment and perfume delight the heart, and the sweetness of a man's friend gives delight by hearty counsel. Do not forsake your own friend or your father's friend, nor go to your brother's house in the day of your calamity. Better is a neighbor nearby than a brother far away. When I was probably about 13 or 14 years old, during the summers, something unusual happened to me. Of course, in those days, in the summertime, it was fun time. I don't know about your life during those years of the early teenage, but we were out of school, and my small hometown of 2,800, we could just roam all over the town and just have so much fun doing all kind of things you can do in a town of 2,800. It was just a joy. I wasn't expected to do much around the house, and so it was supposed to be just a joyous, fun time for 12 to 13 weeks. But three houses up the street from our little home, a boy came to spend the summers with his grandmother and his great-grandmother. His dad was in the Air Force, and I'm not sure where he lived, and the parents were separated. And the mother worked, wherever she lived, and so Leonard Russell Dillon Jr. was sent to live with his grandmother and great-grandmother 3 houses up the street. So because the grandmother worked and the great-grandmother was an invalid and bedridden, there was no one in the house that he could deal with. So guess what? From morning to evening, Leonard Russell Dillon was at my home. I would walk out of the house in the morning, and there he'd be. And at night, when I went in for the evening, he would be out there watching me go in. I mean, it was like that all summer long. In fact, he wouldn't go home for lunch. He'd just sit out under a tree and wait for me to finish up with lunch. Leonard Russell Dillon had absolutely no social skills. To say hello was a major task for this young man. I tried, in fact, it was always Leonard Russell Dillon Jr., okay? I tried to help him with that because nobody ever introduced himself that way as we were children. I said, look, why don't we give you a neater way of introducing yourself? And I thought about it, I said, why not Russ Dillon? That sounds cool. Well, so we went out, and I was ready to introduce him to somebody. And I said, this is, and before I could say Russ, Leonard Russell Dillon Jr. And that was the way he was. So for 2 whole summers, I was his social secretary and his entertainment director. Now, why didn't I just tell him to go home? Well, in those days, at least I thought, when people came to my house to play, you played with them. And you played with them as long as they were there. And I just didn't understand I could do anything else. You probably know something about my mother as I've expressed things about her. I cannot explain how valuable she was in my life, giving me principles and values and convictions. But this was one place where my mom should have stepped in. And she should have said, Leonard Russell Dillon Jr., go home. Go home, and if my son wants to play with you, he'll call you. But you stay home until he does. She should have done that, but she didn't. In fact, I think back now, and probably she knew the situation up there in the 3 houses up the street, and knew the situation, and therefore felt sorry for Leonard Russell Dillon Jr. And I became an instrument of her sympathy and compassion during those days. He was 2 years older than me and knew everything in his mind, and he corrected me on everything I said. He was an expert in every subject, especially that I mentioned. One time, however, I had a lot of fun with that. We were sitting up in a tree, and he wanted to frighten me with his knowledge, and so he began explaining about this horrible, poisonous spider that would crawl around in trees, and he explained all the details about it. And a little twig fell on the back of his neck. And by that time, of course, he had terrified himself about the spider. And he wanted me to look, and of course, I said something like, what color did you say they were? And he was absolutely terrified. I mean, I've never seen anyone quite that frightened, probably. And he asked me to brush it off and get it away from him. And of course, I said something like, I'm not going to touch that, which of course was even more frightening to him. Finally, I let him know that it was indeed a twig. And then I almost fell out of the tree laughing and break my neck. But nevertheless, that was one of those times that it worked out beautifully for me and his knowledge. All my other friends disappeared during those summers. I picked them up again when school started, but frankly, they did not want to be around Leonard Russell Dillon Jr., so I was alone with him. About this time, I started to be fascinated by girls and wanted to talk to them. But Leonard Russell Dillon Jr. being with me killed that idea for sure. Didn't work. Nothing pleased him. I offered all kinds of fun things to do, suggesting this and that. He didn't like any of them. He hated athletics, which of course was a big part of my life, and anything of real action and activity. Nothing like that. In fact, he was a dull, pessimistic, humorless, totally self-centered individual. Yet I'm sure he thought he was blessing me by his very presence. Later, he was moved to my hometown and actually went to school and graduated there. And so I saw him in those last years. We moved across town, and so he wasn't near where I lived. I noticed, though, through those later years, he never had a friend. Never. He was always sort of like a ghost, like just something moving through the hallways without any connection with the world round about him. Never spoke to anybody. Never had anything like a friend. Sometime I heard the teachers speak to him. They used the word Leonard. I was surprised they didn't say, hello, Leonard Russell Dillon Jr., but they didn't. The truth is, we spent 2 summers together, but we were never what I'd call friends. In fact, we were definitely together, as I have told you, but the vital, necessary things of friendship were missing. Now, I've explained Leonard Russell Dillon Jr. to you because I want to talk about friendship. Recently, I found an article in a magazine called Ebony that was truly outstanding. An individual called a life strategist gave 5 questions to ask about friendships, especially those that seem to drain us and do not uplift our spirits and give us joy in our lives. And you know, we have the right to evaluate our relationships and determine what is best for us. And here are those 5 questions. First of all, does this friendship energize me or drain me? Does this friendship energize me or drain me? Does it fatigue me, in other words, or restore me? Is it exhausting to me on a regular basis to have this so-called friendship? Proverbs chapter 27, verse 17 reminds us, as iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. Well, friendship ought to do that, sharpen us and energize us and uplift us and make things better for us, as the writer of Proverbs says. Question number 2. Can I trust this person? Can you really trust this individual that you're calling a friend or calls you a friend? Proverbs chapter 11, verse 13 reminds us, a talebearer reveals secrets, but he that is a faithful spirit conceals the matter. Can you trust this person? Proverbs 17:9, he who repeats a matter separates friends and causes all kinds of other trouble as well. So can I trust this person? Question number 3, do I actually like this person's company? In other words, to be around this person, to connect to this person, to talk to this person. If there were no other reason but the joy of his presence, would you be friends with this particular individual? You know, we are friends many times for various reasons. For convenience, you know, if you work in some organization and it's natural with breaks and other times to congregate together. And so in a way you develop friends that way. But are they really, really friends? And what if you didn't have that congregating in the business or whatever? Would you want to be friends with that individual? We sometimes, again, are friends because of benefits. Maybe we're working together in some organization or business, and it's beneficial to have that relationship. Well, if you didn't have that, see, would you still enjoy the company of that person? Number 4, am I myself with that person? In other words, does he accept the real me? Can you truly relax? Or are you guarded? Are you cautious? Do you never feel quite at ease as you converse, as you communicate? Proverbs 17:17 says, a friend loves at all times. Maybe when we're not our best selves. Maybe they see a side of us that is not maybe the one that we'd see around a church building. And I don't mean a sinful kind of, I just mean a human being. It's not on, the top of the ladder all the time. Am I myself with this person? And finally, this question. Is the friendship a two-way street? A two-way street. There is a classic passage in Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 through 12. In fact, it's the longest passage I know of in the Word of God talking about friendships. And there are a lot of things there, and I just want to mention a couple of things. Verse 10, if the friend falls, there will be one to lift up his companion. So in other words, you're not going through life, you're not walking along symbolically alone. But if you fall, there's someone there to help you. And obviously, that may turn around. There may be a time when he falls, and you reach out a hand and you lift him up. And it's a two-way street. Now, a lot of people don't understand that, and they wonder, how in the world can I have friends? Or why do I not have friends? And never realizing that they want simply a receiving process for themselves rather than something totally different. Let me now go to my third point. We've introduced Leonard Russell Dillon Jr. We've talked about 5 questions for you to determine the kind of friends you want. And now I want to close with our third point, wisdom for Christian friendship, and some suggestions. Number 1, what determines friendship? Well, you begin to think about what are the things that have drawn you to people through the years and probably continue to draw you. Well, some just elementary things, contact. You have to connect with people. You have to somehow create a relationship. And I'm sure for many of you, you have old friends from the past, and they may have moved 1,000 miles away from here. But there are telephones, aren't there? And there are texting, and there are all kinds of ways of keeping the process going. So you're still connecting, probably. Well, we did that to begin with, didn't we? And we established